Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talkin Fire, where we talk all things fire, right? From leadership to management to strategies and tactics, to basically everything that involves the modern fire service and maybe even some of our history. So we're going to talk all things fire. Today, our guest is Matt Aalto. Matt is currently a battalion chief with the Estacada Rural Fire District in Oregon. And Matt and I go kind of way back. I feel like I've known him forever, but really we've only known each other 7 years. We met at the National Fire Academy and spent, I think, 4 or 6 weeks together down there during the managing officer program back in 2017. So again, I have a relationship with him, and I think that makes this really cool because this is our first episode. If you're just tuning in now, you've probably seen another one because nobody's going to see this one right away because we have no audience yet, which kind of makes it cool. I joked with Matt on the phone earlier that I picked him because alphabetically he is my first friend. AA, LTO, you don't really get much higher than that. But the reality is I needed someone that I could just talk to, and that's Matt. So that's where we are. Matt, how you been?
Very, very good. Thank you for having me. This is cool.
So
Appreciate being here.
yeah, and I didn't know till we started talking a couple weeks ago about this that you had hosted a podcast a while back for a little while.
Yep, it was in relation with First Arriving Media, and it was Tiger Schmittendorf and I, and we discussed recruitment and retention. It was, the intention to really just create some awareness and answer some questions for people that are struggling with, their organization. So it was a lot of fun. We only did a couple episodes, and we ran into, COVID and other issues that slowed us down. But yeah, it was a good medium.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about recruitment and retention in a little while because that. I would never say that's your wheelhouse, but that is your specialty. I mean, clearly you are much more than just someone into recruitment and retention. But I also think that it is really a specialty for you and a passion. So we're going to talk about that. Walk me through, you've been in the fire service, but 16 years, 15 and a half, 16, somewhere in that zone, coming up on 16.
Yep.
I mean, we're kind of the same age. Walk me through that. How does that, I mean, this isn't your first career. Let's not be crazy here. How do you end up as the battalion chief of an interesting department? I mean, it's an interesting department in a good way. How do you end up there?
It's funny. I know all of us have our different stories of how we get to where we're going. Mine in summary, I owned a media company. I was, owned my own business and I had media. Loved it. There was a lot of fun with it, but there's always you're always selling. You know what I mean? You're always in a state of selling. Like I'm trying to sell a product. I'm trying to do something. And after a while, that wasn't as fulfilling, and I was in sales and management for years. And again, it was that always asking, for something, right? I'm always trying to get a sale, or being dependent on others to get a sale for me. So I started to get fatiguing. And there's a time when I really started evaluating, looking for something different, right? And I saw an advertisement for a CERT team, those community emergency response teams, right?
Oh yeah,
They got the green helmets and the vests, and
yeah, oh yeah.
So, I thought, that sounds pretty cool. They needed 24 hours of training, and I thought I could be of some use to that. And I thought it'd be interesting to get myself out of the house. So I did a CERT team, and when I was done with the training, they never used us, right? There just wasn't an application for us to use, and so I didn't really like that. I wanted to do something else. So the American Red Cross has a disaster action team, and that's where they, when fire calls for the Red Cross and they show up, these are typically disaster action team members, and they show up and they provide support to people that have been burned out of their residencies. They can get them prescription medications, client assist cards. They take care of them post-accident, right?
Yep. Okay.
And so I got involved with that. And it was on one of those calls. I was with a Tualatin Valley Fire and Rescue, and there was an apartment fire. And in that apartment fire displaced several families. And at the time, I didn't know what else to do to get several families relocated. So we got a TriMet bus, and we brought a TriMet bus in, and we had a bunch of people staying in the bus. And it apparently caught the eye of one of the officers from TVFNR, and they said, "Have you ever thought about doing the fire service?" And at this point, I was 30, and I thought, well, no, I'm 30, right?
Right, yeah. Young man's game, so to speak.
Yeah, it hadn't crossed my mind. The idea. My mom has always worked at a hospital, right? So I had always had a little bit of emergency management type of awareness, but never the thought of doing that. So anyways, I sat and thought on that, and I didn't know how to get involved. And so I started did the Googling, and And essentially Portland Community College came up with having a fire program. And so I thought that would be interesting. So instead of going to a fire station, I went straight to a college. I enrolled, I started in a fire academy. And after my first term, I started to obviously learn, right, where the career could go. And I started volunteering and volunteered for a couple of years, got hired on at State and Fire District, Marion County, Oregon, that as a recruitment retention coordinator and line fireman.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there because I want to ask. That's the first time you made a YouTube video. Is that the first time?
It could have been.
I like 13.
It's some of my better stuff.
There's
It's
a great video of you in
not
that
knowing what to do with my hands.
yeah, in a powder blue shirt.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
glorious.
right. And it was 13 years ago, and it was like spot on, right? You just looked younger. I mean, I would look younger. I mean, like,
Well, thank you. It was,
but
well, yeah, I think it was day three on the job, and I wasn't ready to be on camera, and so it was really one of those. I'm talking, I'm going through the motions, but it was probably the first YouTube.
okay. So from there,
Yeah, so from there, I was at State and Fire District on a SAFER grant. That's for staffing for adequate fire emergency response services, the grants.
yep,
And it was there for 5 years. When the grant went out, then I worked at Gaston Fire District and started as an officer there, or I'm sorry, started as a firefighter there, promoted to lieutenant, promoted to captain. Um, in all this stuff, I started doing more recruitment stuff on a state and national level. But when we get to that stuff, we
yeah,
can get
yeah,
into it.
absolutely.
And then after a number of years, 15, 16 years on the line, then I saw an opportunity for Battalion Chief in Estacada. And it was exciting. It was a training officer position and recruitment retention. And I was excited for the changes that were going on there, excited for the people. I wanted a new challenge, and that's where I ended up. And so I've been there for a little bit over a year now, and absolutely love it. It's been a great transition for me. So
And
that's kind of where I'm at.
and you've got a really great video, well produced video from there, right? Like that was a few months ago. You guys made that.
Yeah, we've got
That
a person that we've been working with that does some pretty tremendous stuff, and he's volunteered a lot of his time for us, and so he creates movies and a lot of content on the side, but he's chosen to do some of his community efforts with us, and
that's
we've been
cool.
the recipients of some good stuff.
So Estacada is like what, southeast of Portland, south,
Yeah, it is.
and
Yep.
and then like a little west of Mount Hood. So like
Yep.
it's like an hour in both directions.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
right.
right rough. So
Yep, that's
yeah,
fair.
so about 3,600 miles or so from me, something like that. Because I
Yeah,
can, if I got on Route 20 and I just started west, I would eventually end up in Oregon or Oregon or Oregon
or gun or gun.
Oregon or gun. So yeah, so I'd end up there. So that's how you ended up kind of where you are today through the fire service. So you think, like thinking back, it sounds like the first half of your adult life or the first half of your working career, right? You're always you're chasing something, right? Because you're in sales, you're in ownership, like you're always looking for something. And did you think even then that you knew that wasn't for you, that you were somebody who needed to give? Because that's what you do now, right? I mean, you give. I mean, that's what we do in the fire service. We give of ourselves, to others. Sure, we do it for a paycheck because you can't. The lights aren't free, right? You gotta make a little bit of something, right? Most places. Some have volunteers, and that's awesome. But if you can do that right, that's really awesome. But at the end of the day, you realize there's something different for you, so you end up in the fire service and giving. And I'm going to guess you're happy.
Yeah, I love it. It was honest, Dean, I think what the transition for me is that, when my parents get to retirement age, they never had the ability to retire and do the things they want to do, right?
Hmm.
They didn't have a lot of those things. And so when I was looking for different things, I realized I had two things that were missing in my life. I didn't have a long-term, really healthy, retirement program to take care of, down the road, and I didn't like what I did. I wasn't happy. I wasn't proud. I just didn't feel. It's kind of hard to find the words at times. It just didn't feel fulfilled, right? It didn't feel
Sure.
like I was doing anything that was greater than what was today, and tomorrow's business was tomorrow's sale, and I just didn't. It didn't fit for me. Didn't fit for my personality style, and so that's what created a change.
So then you're in the fire department. You're doing so. How did you end up doing the recruitment and retention? Like, how does that happen? You get hired in your first job on the SAFER grant, and you're the recruitment and retention coordinator. which your area has a lot of combination, a lot of volunteer, a lot of call. So there, it's a little different from where I am in Massachusetts, and that's a little different for me. But it's like were you the only full-time person there, and that was your job, was to just figure out how to attract people?
No, it was a combination department at State and Fire. Their chief, assistant chief, IT, line firefighters, and so they had staff, and they were largely volunteer though.
Gotcha.
And in the job description, some of the required skills were the ability to have networking skills, the ability to create media, do some of the things that I had a background in, and I hadn't really thought that you could get into the fire service on the career side through that avenue. And so it was when I saw that I thought, well, I can piece those together. I was already doing volunteer work, and it was something that I was excited about, and it felt like it'd be a good fit, so that's what I went with.
It's really, we talk so often in the fire service about we don't have as many people coming from the trades anymore. At least that's something I hear. And it's really not just the trades as we think of them, right? I mean, it's everything. It's people with a diverse background. We just need people with a diverse background, because if we ended up with all carpenters or all electricians, we'd be in trouble too, right? Like, we need people that have a background. They were running a business. They were doing some media stuff. They were maybe making the sale, however, right? Whatever they're selling, they're making the sale. Because some of those skills are really just transferable skills, right? So you take that experience, you bring it to the fire department, and then you obviously did a good job, right? Because you found a home in recruitment and retention. And you really, I mean, to say you're a subject matter expert, I think is it's probably one of the truest statements I can make about somebody. Like, you're all over recruitment and retention. So walk me through that a little bit. How do you go from making a YouTube video 13 years ago in a powder blue shirt next to an engine to, to being somebody who not only it has presented across the country on recruitment and retention? How does that happen?
It initially it happened initially from the job, right? So the job is, you're here and now you need to perform. So that's where it all starts.
Fair.
I wasn't in the position for 30 days before I was, again, looking online, looking for resources, looking for help, trying to get some direction. And I came across Tiger Schmittendorf's name out of New York, and I just reached out to him. And it was, I think about it, I was looking for a mentor, right? I was looking for somebody that could give me some insider news. How do we do this? And Tiger was gracious enough to return my call. And when he came out to Oregon, he was gracious enough to reach out to me, and we met for ice cream, among all things. And then we built a relationship, right? And some of those things, he opened up a lot of doors for me.
I want to talk about that. Why don't we go down that road for a second about networking, right? Like, we think about that, and I grew up with my dad. My dad had a business, a gas station repair shop, right? And we were part of a networking group to try to, get business, share ideas, that kind of thing. And then you come to the fire service, and, it probably took me 4 or 5 years to realize that was another skill that I could use in the fire service to help. I don't want to say advance me, because I know that when we all say that, like, that doesn't sound like you're coming from a real humble place when you say to advance me, but we all know that as we advance, those around us come up with us. And as we challenge ourselves, we challenge the people around us, and we all rise, right? So it's not a matter of, I want to advance and I'm going to do it at whatever cost. It's more like that, hey, there's somewhere to go. Let's go together. And how do we all get there? So, I realized that skill of building a network and talking to people and talking with people was important. And then I moved that into fire service. It sounds like you pretty much did the same thing. Is that, and your network's valuable to you, obviously. How would someone's, 25 in the fire service, how do they do that? How do they build a network?
If they're already in the fire service?
Yeah.
I think it depends on what they're trying to get out of it. I had an agenda. I wanted to be better. I wanted to do better at recruiting. I wanted to have a system in place. I had a goal of what I wanted, right? And so I followed the network to try to build those goals and support what the end result was. Like you said, lifting you up into a better place. If someone's in the fire service and they're passionate about a certain topic and they want to get better in that certain topic, reach out to the subject matter experts. Go to the conferences, get yourself out of your comfort zone, learn your trade. We unfortunately are in a business that we are forced in many cases to push people through this trade so quickly that the depth, the knowledge, the saturation of information doesn't
Hmm.
always happen. And because of that, we have people that have a lot of ambition, but not a lot of the background to support that ambition. And so to be patient and to understand things. And when you have original content, I believe that is what really truly drives that success, right? If your content is original, it's coming from your head, you have your own vulnerabilities, you have your own things that you can stand on, and you can defend them. I think that's where a lot of that success comes from. So if someone's 20 years old and they want to um, make an impact on a local, state, national stage, it would be to really, really focus and hone in on a skill, right? Or a part of the fire service that you're truly passionate about, and then build it from there. But it's
Yeah, I
look
mean,
for mentor, you know?
you know, folks like us that came up in the size departments we've been involved with, we got to be kind of jack of all trades, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to, because maybe today you're in the engine, tomorrow you're in a brush piece, the next day, you're on the ladder truck, and then you're doing 2 ambulance calls, and you're doing all at the same time. But so we got to be kind of good at all those things. But you're right. So you still have to find kind of that where you are, where your groove is. I mean, and that groove can change. I mean, I was in one groove at one time, and then I got into a leadership groove, and now in my current role, I'm managing budgets, doing something very different. And then I said, well, I really like to talk to people. I'm like, and that's kind of how this thing happened. It was one of those like, well, I really just enjoy chewing the fat with people with common interests about common things. And what better way to start than talking about the fire service? And I think that so often, like you just called up Tiger, right? You just call him and he answers the phone, or you send an email and they reply back. So often, I think that people get intimidated by, oh yeah, I saw their name in a magazine, or they're in a book. They're going to talk to me. And the reality is that 90% of them are in the magazine or they wrote the book, so you will talk to them,
That's right.
right? Because they
Yeah,
understand that their time here is not, we all get so much time, and that's it, right? Their time in the fire service, there's time on the planet, that's it. That's all you get. And what better way to live on than to take all the things you've learned and pass them on? So
yep.
I think with very little exception, and I'm sure there are some jerks out there. I haven't met any. I mean, I couldn't name drop the jerks, but like I'm sure there are a few out there. But for the majority of the time, if you send an email or you send a message to most of these folks, they're going to respond and they're going to be happy you're interested in what they're doing.
Oh,
And,
yes.
and I think that's really, people miss that. They think
Yeah,
like, yeah,
I think you're spot on, Dean. I mean, there's a little bit of intimidation factor when you see these folks on a national level. And every single person I've had an opportunity to meet with, I've looked at them, like look at Tiger like that. I've looked at, so many of these folks that you see speaking, and everyone's been wonderful to talk to, and just capturing 2 minutes of their time, right? I remember meeting Chief Halton at FDIC and thinking, there's no way this guy's gonna give me the time of day. And he walked by and not only to give me the time of day, but for somehow he remembered a conversation we had a couple of years ago. He's was a very genuine man. And so, when you think about that, it's like, yeah, people, this is what it's about, right? It's about networking, sharing ideas, it's sharing best practices, it's sharing friendship. It's our friendship is an example. People from our class is an example
hmm
that we took a class together, and but the friendship and the connections remain regardless of geography. And I think that's the best part of the networking. That if somebody's interested in looking at building their network, if they're introverts, you can still do that. Just gonna be a little bit harder, right?
right, right.
Um,
Oh yeah,
but extrovert individuals that have a means of doing it and are willing to be criticized, they're willing to be wrong, they're willing to be. There's a term called a scout, right? Where a scout's always looking for information, and if they're always looking for information, you can be a subject matter expert, but be prepared to have your mind changed. Uh, and I think those are the folks that really enjoy this. And so for people that are out networking, meet people, right? You just meet people and stay in touch with people. That investment, man, that's the good stuff, right?
oh yeah,
That's
oh
the
absolutely.
the best
So
part of this.
we're gonna get to. I think we're gonna get to Emmitsburg eventually here, you and I, in some conversation. But you brought up FDIC, so let's go down that road. So, how many times you've been there, and you're speaking again next year? I saw that, right? You're back there April of 25. You were there April this year. Was this your
Yep.
first time speaking at FDIC?
Yeah, it was. And I wish that I would have known that they make medications to lower your blood pressure before you speak. But yeah, so I've been twice prior
Mm-hmm.
to visit, and then of course it was slowed down through COVID.
Yep.
And then put in my presentation, which was an all original. I it was called Expectations and Accountability, and I submitted it. And I've taught it locally, and I've taught it a couple other places, but I never put it together all in one package. And when it was accepted, it was beyond an honor. It was one of my 5 top things I wanted to accomplish in my career. So yeah, so I was able to instruct there, and twice actually, Women in Fire conference,
Yep.
and then at the main conference a couple days later.
And they're bringing you back for both of those, right? Same presentation?
Same presentation, and right now, as far as I know, just the main conference.
Okay.
The Women in Fire conference, they did an invite later, as we were
Gotcha.
closer to
Yep.
the conference. So
Sure.
so if they do, it'd be an honor. But regardless, I'm just glad to be going back, and I really can't wait to teach in this environment. It was really cool. It was unique, and just again, it's such an honor to be able to do that there.
Or going back to FDIC for a second time is that I think, and I've been out there once, obviously been watching FDIC for years, kind of seeing who's there. And I do that now with a little different lens because there's some ideas that I kind of contribute to some things now. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But you see a lot of people that are either, a flash in the pan or kind of one hit wonders. They end up at FDIC once. I don't know. I'm not going to say, for whatever reason, they don't go back, right? They're either they chose that they didn't want to go back, or not. And I think that it speaks worlds of your program that they say, hey, we want you back. And then you submit the same program, and they actually just want that. They want you and that program, which means that there's plenty of people out there that need to hear your message and didn't get to hear it last year, right? That just means that of the 30,000 people, some of them want to consume what you're sharing, and that's awesome.
Appreciate it.
So
I hope that's I hope that's the case. It's you get the feedback right from
yep.
from there, and the feedback was flattering. And it felt good to be able to deliver that class right and to get the reception it did. I and so I would like to take a little bit of credit for being able to deliver that content, have something original. I think the other part of it though is the class. I think it's the content. I think it's if it was myself teaching or anybody else teaching, it's the content itself. I think that is so impactful. Not to go too far into it, but the class is expectations and accountability. And when we do climate surveys, Dean, we do climate surveys with our people all the time, and that we will just ask them. There's 47 questions in a climate survey, and we're really trying to understand: is our department healthy? Right? Are we doing the right things? Are we making the right changes? The feedback that we get, and the feedback we got when we traveled nationally with the IFC and teach, was people were really, really frustrated. They didn't understand the expectations. They didn't know what was expected of them. Right? That was a big frustrating thing. And then when things would change, they didn't get to update expectations. And then if something did change on them, they're told, you must, you shall, you will. And then they weren't held accountable, or others weren't held accountable. That drove retention. It drove it down. And it was killing these organizations and killing these departments. And it's because people are terrified of conflict. So the point of this class is to understand and how to deal with conflict in a healthy way, right? How to have fun at your fire department, how to create an environment where people can thrive. And
Yeah.
and it's not taboo to say that you can work with the fire department and you can still enjoy it. You can still work through a lot of those things and perfect. We all know anyone's done a day on the job, they know it's not perfect. But there's times in our careers we can look back and go, I really loved it when this happened, or I really liked it when I was on this shift, or I really loved it with that officer. There's different times, right? Well, that the hope of this class is that people can create an environment where those things are flourishing. So going back to what you said, Dean, is I was flattered to be invited back, and I'd like to think that some of it was a delivery, but to be quite frank, I think it's just a message that people in the fire service want to hear.
I think people just have to embrace this conflict idea and realize that so often we're conflicted about ideas. We're not conflicted about people. I mean, you and I could have a disagreement right now, and at the end of the day, I have no trouble with how our friendship is. Right. We could disagree about an idea, and that's just a little conflict about an idea. But we get so hung up on, if we don't agree, we mustn't like each other. Those are different things. But we could go down a rabbit hole, I suppose, of people on one side of a fence and another side of a fence. And I don't know. I like everybody no matter what side of the fence they're on. Just be nice. That's like, if you're nice, you're all set, like,
Well, and that's the thing though. It's like, you've heard the term so many times, 90% of the fires we fight are in the firehouse, and the only, the 10% are left out, on the street. But where do we spend our time when we're at the station, right? Are we spending time? We're spending time doing the right things. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to create an imbalance, but we spend our time throwing ladders, pulling hose, and the operational fireground things, right?
Yep.
We're really, 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 really good at that. But at what point do we start to transition that and start to focus on people management, right? We take classes where we always call them leadership classes, leadership on, leadership to leadership, all these things. How come we don't teach a followership class? Why did we skip that step? Couldn't we provide that? Couldn't we have followership 1 through 50 before we start talking about leadership? And so when you look at these things and you start to really break it down, it's no wonder that we have such difficult times holding people accountable. It's no wonder that we would rather just pretend a problem would go away versus dealing with it. And so I know I get about a soapbox on this, but I get it's exciting because, there's tools and there's ways of doing it that are really user friendly, that when we're working with these people that we're so close with and we love them and they're part of our families and we're going to be seeing them for 24, 48 hours straight for an indefinite amount of time, you want to preserve those relationships by having an understanding of how I'm going to approach a conflict. Because firefighter, man, we fight over the best stuff. I mean, what we're going to have for dinner, and it gets into crazy things, and we fight over how we're going to load a hose into a bed. And the reality is, though, if you just break it down, there's a lot of different ways to do things. And if we can coach and help guide people to get to those things, especially those 20-year-olds that perhaps haven't had a life filled yet with lots of conflict or with a significant other or things of that nature, if we can provide those people with those skills early on, what a career preservation that is, right? That and a healthy preservation is if they can build those skills up now, again, they're going to play out benefits for them at home, not just in the firehouse.
So we've talked about FDIC. We've talked a little bit about networking. I don't have like a list of questions here, but I have a list. I'm looking over because I have a list of things I want to talk to you about.
Sure.
But I want to make sure I segue some of these the right way. Talk to me about your fire boot camp. Let's talk about that, because I was on that website this week, and that is really interesting. And I like some of the stuff you got going on. So talk to me a little bit about that.
So the fire boot camp started with a partnership with a friend of mine named Isla Borders. Isla was a captain at Cornelius Fire at the time. Now she works for Clackamas Fire District Number 1. And she's actually one of the first people that played pro baseball. She's got a wonderful book out, and anyway, she's become a really, really close friend. And we started to talk about ways to increase volunteers in our area and ways to help give people an insight into the fire service for the career side as well. It was a joint effort, and so our first camp, the fire boot camp, was a camp for women to be able to get exposure to the fire service. And so we brought in people from all over the country. We brought in sports nutritionists from Boston. We brought people in from the Red Sox organization. We brought people in from California. We brought people in from all over the country that were experts in their field, experts in design, and could speak to women and things that were concerning to what it meant to join the fire service, what it looked like, and how they could build their own network. And so we set up our first boot camp. We had, I can't remember the numbers now, I believe it was about 20 firefighters come through it. And from that group of 20, 16 of them ended up being in the fire service, and now 9 of them are career firefighters. And so that's a pretty remarkable number, right? And I think that was a little bit of I think a little bit of a fluke, just because it's such a high number, right?
Sure,
I don't want it to come across as that is an uncommon result.
Right. That would have the results not typical down the bottom, right?
Yeah, that would have a disclaimer.
Yeah,
that
results
said,
not typical, but impressive.
It was a great outcome for our camp, and it was a great it was great leverage for our next camps. So as we were to build them up and hold other camps, and then they became more of just a women's camp. It became a fire camp, right? So they became a camp that anybody could come in that was interested in the fire service vocation, and so that's really what it has become right now. We have another one coming up here. It's either going to be this year in October, or it'll be next year. We're in Oregon here, and everything is on fire around us, and so
Right.
it's
Yeah.
difficult
No.
to do it when we have a aggressive fire season.
So it's not 1-2 training, right? It's not fire 1-2. It's not. It's just
No,
like it's an intro. It's a little bit about what is this about.
100%. It is. You're not coming out with certifications. You're going to go in there. You're going to meet a lot of people who have similar interests, similar questions. You're going to have people answer those questions, and then they're going to go out and they're going to work out. And we put them through workouts that are uncomfortable, and then we have them in full PPE and gear, and we have them using saws, and we have them throwing and climbing ladders, and we have them going up in aerials, and then we do a live fire exhibit for them. We have external suppression, but they're getting in the engines, off the engines, the whole thing. So they're getting a real sample of what it's like, but they're just getting the sample, right?
Sure. Well, yeah, and I think that is so important because in that call and volunteer arena, you get a lot of people that their heart's in the right place. Maybe their timing is in the right place, meaning that they're in a position in life where they can dedicate some time to training and whatnot. But they don't know what they don't know. So, they don't know if it's going to be hot when they get into a fire room. They don't know how high the ladder really is when you're on the top of it, right? And if you can give these folks exposure to that stuff, then they can make a good decision. Because maybe the fire service is right for them, and maybe moving from this kind of a program to a 1-2 program, getting certified, trained up, sure. Or maybe they say, this isn't for me. The community's got a really active CERT team, or the Lions Club is real active in town, and I'm going to find a way to scratch that itch of community service somewhere else. Because unfortunately, having taught in what we call our call and volunteer program for years, a lot of those folks, they do a couple hundred hours of training, and after that, they walk away. Like,
I was just going to say, Dean, how does it feel if you're a fire chief, right? Or you're running the board, you get the budget, or your training officers, and if you're also a candidate and it doesn't work out, then that you invest in onboard and intake and bring somebody on board just so they can try the fire service out.
Right.
That's the success of the fire at boot camp, is that they can try it out in 2 days versus trying to go through weeks of prep and filling the spot from somebody else that definitely does know they want to do it. Right. That's the value of it. It's really this awareness. And after 2 days, people know pretty quickly if they don't want to do it. And that's the whole point.
Yeah. If you don't like an SCBA, you know right away. It doesn't take me a half an hour to say, I don't like this mask on my face. You're going to know in 30 seconds or a minute and a half, this ain't for me.
Yep. There's different ways of setting expectations, right? And that is one way to set an expectation, is that you are going to do these things. Now, not everyone climbs an aerial every day, but some do.
Right.
And the reality is, if you're expected to do it at any given point, you need to be able to do it. And there have been people that have gone through our camps that didn't come back the second day. And but the deal is also, just like with the camps as with the fire service, it's not for everybody. And it's okay to say that. It's healthy to say it. I've heard so many people say the fire service is for everybody. We'll find a home for you. No, it's not for everybody. And it's not okay to say it's for everybody, because when you say that and it doesn't work out, then they go away with those feelings. But if a good expectation's on the front end, and if things don't work out, or people aren't able to do the job, maybe physically or mentally, then the accountability piece is there to support them. So if there is an exit out of this vocation, that they have a way of saying it wasn't for me, right? Versus I got kicked out, or I couldn't cut the mustard. It wasn't for me.
Right.
And and then they move on and we go on to the next thing. But yeah, there's a lot of value in that, but especially for academy instructors that have seen people go for a couple of weeks or get to the end and then they disappear. That's why. There's a reason for it.
Yeah. And you're right. I want to talk about something you said there, was that it's not for everybody, and it isn't for everybody. And it doesn't have to be for everybody forever either. Two more things kind of fire department related, and then I want to talk a couple of things you related, and then we can wrap up, right? Because we've been going a little less than an hour, and we don't have a set time. We could go all night. It doesn't matter. I think that Mac told me we can host a 30-hour Zoom meeting, so really we could do this for another 29 hours. I'm assuming both of us have to work in the morning. So, although you see, it's easy for you because you're West Coast, so you still have another few hours. It's been dark here, an hour and a half or something.
Yeah, we're still daylight right now, so we're hanging in.
Yeah, see, you're in good shape. And I don't want to get too deep into this, but the way your full-time department is structured with Local 1159 is really interesting to me, right? Because they represent 7 different fire departments, or
Yeah.
something. Did I say that right? I mean, I don't
Yep.
fire districts,
You're
fire
right.
departments,
Yep.
and that was super interesting to me, because so that means that your department like has to negotiate with that union has to negotiate essentially with 7 different organizations, 7 different communities.
Yeah, so there are, yeah, you'd have 7 different collective bargaining CBAs, collective
Yep.
bargaining agreements, and that's not uncommon thing over here. My last station with Tualatin Valley is local 1660, and that also had 5, 6, 7 different departments, because a lot of these departments are much smaller, right? And in the years past, they were either all volunteer or they might have had like a paid chief or something. But as times have changed, they've
Mm-hmm.
started to hire more people, more firefighters, and in doing so, unionization was that next step. And so, in that unionization process, they could either create, and go through the paperwork and go through
Yep.
creating a whole, local, or if they can tether onto a larger one, then they can support the political action committees. They can support, the community wellness, benevolent funds, and so forth, which help them do some of that heavy lifting on the front end. So our firefighters are unionized under the Clackamas Fire
Mm-hmm.
Districts union, and when they do the collective bargaining, when they do the negotiation, they have their own contract, they have their own, everything is negotiated on that level. And so, yeah, that's not where we're at.
Hmm. Okay. So, and again, like, there's not. We haven't ever talked about that before, and that was just in doing some research. I said, "Oh, that's interesting," and I guess that's another piece of the fire service is that even 25 years in the fire service. Yesterday, as a matter of fact, my first interview was yesterday, 25 years ago, and with that, like, you just still find something different, something interesting, something new. Like, there always will be. I will research the fire service for another 25 years for some reason. I don't know what it will be, but it will be for some reason. And
Yeah.
I'm sure in 25 years, I'll be like, so why do you do that? Well, how come you did that? That's interesting.
Yeah.
So on your Facebook a couple of weeks ago, I think it could have been a month or two ago now, you were talking about, not yours personal, the department's, Estacada was talking about how they train on tech rescue once a month now, on technical rescue. And I thought that was really interesting. Obviously, all hazards response doesn't look sexy on the side of fire trucks, and we'll never write all hazards response on the side of engines, although we probably should. We won't. So your department's committed now to training on tech rescue once a month. How's that playing out? How's that working?
It's working well. So we've always had a component of tech rescue, either be
Mm-hmm.
water or ropes. It just depended on what it looked like.
Yep.
When I started as a training officer, they were still training. They already had a lot of this equipment, but there was a desire to do more of it. They wanted to be able to be better skilled at it. They wanted to really elevate the platform, right? They wanted to have it so it was competitive to get into the tech rescue side of things. They wanted it to be kind of its own identity within a group, because it's such a dangerous low frequency, skill. So we did just that. One of our he has a tremendous amount of experience in rescue. Matter of fact, all of our officers do, but he had really led the charge, and he had said, we need to increase frequency. We need to set standards. We need to have, essentially, we have 2 different lines of tech rescue training. One that is every month and quarterly, and that includes everyone in the department. And then that's what you probably saw on the Facebook post. And then internally, they're drilling way more than that. And so it's allowed us to have some, well, number one, to do a better job, to be independent of exclusive mutual aid, right? Where we always
Yep.
had to call somebody and we're able to handle the majority of our incidents, but still know that we have an amazing group of mutual aid partners that will come in and support us. But now we can lead these rescues on our own. So, yep, it's a big thing for us, and something we're taking a lot of pride in. And we've got a long time left to really master it. Right? We've gotten so much better at it, and these guys are tremendous. But we got more to do. We want to We like to get a boat. We have a rapid deployment craft. We like to get a boat. We like to increase the amount of type of rope rescue we can do. We like to we want to do more because we protect a pretty crazy area with Clackamas River and with a couple highways going through our area with a lot of canyons. So get a lot of calls for service.
Well, so I was thinking that the department I spent the majority of my time on, my hometown here, we protected 44 square, and like that was a lot, right? And that's a pretty big piece of land, and at least in Massachusetts, when you start talking about community sizes, we're in the top 10, and you protect 88 square miles. Like
Yep.
that's a massive, that is a massive area.
Well, the
You,
good news, we don't visit all 88 square miles often there, and we're mostly centrally located. So if we have to go
sure,
anywhere, we're not, but yeah, it's a really, really large area. But again, the thing with a lot of places in Oregon, and it's actually even wider if you go to Eastern Oregon, okay, if you get to the other side of the state. But with those miles, we're parked against, forestry and private timber, and we're surrounded by, other fire departments and districts, and so because of that, yes, we have a large area, but that also increases our ability to have mutual aid. And so
okay,
we have resources that are designed to get us to remote areas, with helicopter resources, off-road resources, drone technology. So yeah, it's a big area, but we visit probably 6 miles of that area most of the time.
fair, okay, yeah, that I guess that makes, and I'm sure if we start to get in percentages, I'm sure that I spent the majority of my years in certain little areas, right? So
Uh, for example, they are now going to be doing their own transport work. So that's a big change, right? And so I'm sure they have their own reasons and their own
yep,
justifications for it. And again, I could see us providing it if the AMR system is busy, right? Let's say the
yep,
AMR system is busy and someone needs to get in. I can see that being a value, and I can see our community, wanting to know that value was there. But you said it earlier, it does take your people out of your response for a period of time. So we're going to have to face that solution, if we get to that place.
yeah, because that is something it's something that when you don't currently do it, meaning you don't currently transport, you can really then look at that as you start to make those decisions and say, well, how do we do that? How do we can best do that?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as opposed to you're already transporting, and now all of your call volume is going up, and now you're chasing your tail, right? Because now your call volume is such that you're in a position where you'll never have enough people. I was telling somebody the other day that my belief is that fire departments will never adequately be staffed, and I don't mean that's a broad brush thing, right? But we'll always be chasing our tail because we can't predict the future. We can say trending and forecasting here. Here's where our call volume is going to be. Here's where the demand is going to be. But unfortunately, because we're dealing with taxpayer money in a lot of places, we can't just hire people for where the trend is looking, right? Where maybe the private sector can do that, right? The private sector can say, hey, we're going to have more customers next year, meaning we need to have more employees. But if we're going to have more calls next year, a lot of times the towns say, or the cities and towns say, we'll wait until you have the more calls, and then we'll hire the more people. And they do. I mean, a lot of them do, but they wait until the more calls are there. So essentially, you're always a little behind where you want to be,
Yeah,
which is
you're in a
okay.
reactive, well, you're in a
Right.
reactive state, and it's our job to make sure that people understand. You're going to get what you're going to give us, right? If you have a standard of cover, then
Mm-hmm.
you can stand on a standard of cover. But a lot of places don't have a standard of cover, so
Right.
you have to be able to adequately tell your community, if you want this, I want to give it to you, but you'll have to give me this. Dr. Pat Lynch is a wonderful resource. She's got some really great stuff out there. About having these conversations with the public. But when we get into a reactive state as a fire service, we're already way behind, right? Because if we want to move anything forward now, by the time we get something done, it takes a long time because we're looking at capital, right? We need to get ambulances. If we want to add more FTEs, and a lot of us have to go through, sometimes you have to go through mayor's office, sometimes you have to go through city commissioner, sometimes you have to go through a board of directors. You have to get the money, if there is money, right? And growth doesn't always yield a higher millage rate. Growth doesn't always yield a guaranteed tax return.
Right.
It's residential growth and commercial growth are two different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times there's things that protect commercial properties from paying, some of the taxes because it's an invite to come to the community.
Mm-hmm.
The fire department is taxed, not taxed, used more, and doesn't have a net return. So And then the cost, what's the cost of a Type 1 fire engine? It's what, $1.5 million, $1.75 million.
Yep.
And then a couple years waiting to get that piece of equipment. So the cost of equipment and the cost of uprising costs, to do things isn't commensurate with the taxes and money that we're bringing in. And so it becomes harder. And so these decisions for us right now, it's nice to be able to look ahead and say, this is where we want to be. This is the value we believe it provides. This is the cost, or the cost of the community, or the cost of the and does it make sense? And I think you talk about staffing. There's a quote that, it's not mine. We got it when I was teaching with the IFC, and I wish I remember the chief's name, but he had said that there's so many departments that depend almost exclusively on volunteerism, and I'm a massive advocate for both career and volunteer. The reality is, though, is the dependency of a volunteer fire service right now is at a crossroads between affordability and reliability. And nothing is free. Nothing is free. And I think that that's a misperception that a lot of people have, is, well, we can bring in 10 volunteers and that's free. Well, number one, it's not. It's not free.
Right.
And number two is that, and this is not a cut to volunteers, this is just an active performance guarantee, is that if you're going to have people respond to 911 calls, which are never scheduled, they're never on time, we never know they're going to happen.
Right.
It is more than a 7-to-1 ratio if you're to have the equivalent of an FTE and a volunteer manpower. I'm not degrading the quality of the individual. I'm just saying availability, time,
Correct.
response to the station. And so when you look at all that stuff, changing to a department that becomes a transport agency requires the vulnerability to not respond to another call as fast as you'd want, right?
Right.
And that's the community trade-off. The community is either going to say, we want you to transport someone, we don't want them to wait, and we understand it's going to take 2 people out of the system. But what's the trade-off? Are we only going to have 2 people on the engine? Are we, So anyway, it's a puzzle piece that everybody's going to have to look at, and it's just not easy. It's not easy to solve that issue, much less any other growth or change issue in an organization.
Right. And you're so right about, the call is never when you're off duty, folks. And when I say off duty, I don't mean just career people. I mean, your volunteers are home, your call people are home, some of your full-time people aren't on duty right now, they're off duty. The call is never when they're all available. Excuse me. I want to talk a little bit about your college degrees and what your thoughts are on college degrees. And then I want to talk about a little bit about books, and then we can wrap up. Actually, I want to say one thing. You talked a lot about followership, and you've said it a few times now. And you're so right how we don't train enough on following, and how it's okay to be like the number 2 person in the organization, or the number 5, or being the best senior firefighter, or being the best junior firefighter. Like, everybody doesn't have to have a lieutenant or a captain ranked, to be influential and make a difference. And I think it's called the first follower or something like that. It's a followership video. It's the dancing man, the crazy dancing man, right? So, and it's about how to start kind of a movement, right? And if obviously people could Google it and come up with this thing, but his presentation's a TED Talk. It's like 4.5 minutes long, and it talks about the importance of those first followers, and really how you can have all the leaders you want, and you can be the best leader in the world. If people aren't there to follow you, that's a problem. And if everybody's trying to be a leader and no one's being a good follower, the organization's going to fall apart. You need
to know that following is healthy, following is good.
Yeah.
And at every role in an organization, you're following, right? You're a follower. It's what public service is. And I think it gets overlooked. Your example of the crowd is fantastic. That is spot on. And one of the things I'll tell a lot of our firefighters, especially the new ones, is that every job on the fire ground is the most important job on the fire ground. An example I'll give of that is I have a new firefighter. Her name was Jordan. We went to a motor vehicle accident. She just finished out of academy. And so where do we put our brand new firefighters on motor vehicle accidents? Traffic, right? They do traffic. And what's one of the scariest and saddest, deaths, reasons for line of duty deaths is typically, motor vehicle accidents, being hit, backed in, so forth.
Yep.
But what do we typically miss in fire academies is teaching how to flag people, because where does that fall in NFPA? How to
right. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I remember telling her when she was done with it, she was so proud to hold the flag, and she was doing a great job, and she had ownership of it, and it was like the biggest moment for her. And she came back to me and she goes, "Well, I didn't cut it, I wasn't doing any of the cool stuff, but I didn't get a cut in the car, but it was really great that I gotta hold the traffic." And I remember looking at her and just telling her, Jordan, you're the first person that has eyes and a way to protect this entire group from making sure that we can actually do the job. That job is the most important job on the fireground at that time, as is the job of the officer, as is the job of the person on the tool. Every job is important. There's nothing that's devalued. And if every single person has to be a leader on the fireground, well, then every single person is going to be behind a mic and a buggy, talking to nobody. And the reality is that it's relieving to be in a position where someone can say, "This is your job, this is your task, go and do it." That to me is relieving. That's about the most empowering thing someone can do, is to give me the order, give me the job, and then let me go do the job.
Hmm.
Um, and followership, in my opinion, it's understanding that that's good. We, look for followership opportunities. And there part of the class that I'm teaching, it goes back. This didn't always used to be the case in culture. There was a change in culture, and it was just prior to World War II. And we can talk about it later, but there was a time in culture that we changed from being, "Let me open the door for you, let me do these things for you," that would be that, to, "I'm going to be a leader, I'm going to lead, I'm going to," and when we had that change never changed back. And so that's why we talk so much about leadership. And I'm exhausted at reading leadership books. There's some really good ones out there that I've enjoyed, and I've reread them. But I've enjoyed other books because you can get those leadership traits and followership traits from almost everything. So, anyways, I just, if there could be more focus on followership, I think we'd start to get the type of followers that we want at the fire station.
um, College degrees in the fire service. You've got a couple of them, as do many people now. I think that there's been an interesting shift in the last, I'll say 2 decades, maybe a little more. I know around here, we chased law enforcement. Law enforcement in Massachusetts, they started with degrees because there was money attached to it a while back. And, that led that side of the house to kind of chase college degrees. They realized it had an impact, a positive impact for the most part. And then a lot of fire contracts and a lot of fire departments started talking about degrees. What are your thoughts, and why do you have? I mean, I think you have a degree that's not fire related from before, and then you have fire related degrees. What are your thoughts on fire related degrees?
Well, I think it comes down to, I mean, I can give like a
Yeah.
scope, big, but I think it really comes down to individual, to be honest with you. I think that the fire service would find itself in a really good position to have an emphasis on trade schools. So they're becoming trade masters. So I think I would love that conversation as well. So I'll put that in staging for now, that idea. But um, for me personally, when I wanted to start getting into the fire service, and I told you the original
Yep.
reasons earlier, Portland Community College, when I first started doing the associates program with them, I just thought that's what it took to be a volunteer. I didn't know that there was a career side behind it. And I already had gone to University of Oregon. Already gone to Clackamas Community College. I had already done school, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so I thought, well, this won't really be school. This is gonna be fire stuff. Um, but after going through the first two terms, which were just academy, I started to learn everything else about the fire service, the EMS side, the rescue side. I started to see other things that I enjoyed. So, and I wanted closure, right? I wanted to be able to say that I had an associate's degree in fire science, because I thought that offered validity, and I thought it showed that I was passionate enough to see it to the end. And so, anyways, that's where I started with fire service and fire protection technology. And I had that for a number of years, and then it became more influential down the road as I began to speak nationally, and as I began to think about where my career was going to take me in 10, 15, 20 years, that if I wanted to move up in operations, a bachelor's degree would be critical.
Mm-hmm.
And so I enrolled at Eastern Oregon University, and started to do mostly online for my bachelor's program, and I loved it. I didn't realize I'd love it. I didn't love my associate's program. It was all right. I loved the bachelor program. I thought it was the best thing. I was eating the classes up. I loved the pace. I loved the learning. It was for me. And so I was able to wrap that up in just under 1 year
Oh,
to get the entire bachelor program done. So anyway, so that was something I loved. So after the bachelor's, I kind of thought I was done. And then I started to meet with people as I would travel. And there was a fellow that you and I had our managing fire officer class with. His name was Dallas Sims. And for any folks out there, Dallas is from Dallas, Texas, and he's probably one of the most modest Texans I ever met.
mm-hmm.
That's not calling other Texans unmodest. That's just Dallas is pretty darn modest. Well, one day we were talking, and he had said he did his master's program, and I was instantly enthralled in what that meant, what it looked for, and why he did it. And he had his different reasons. He did it because he had that guidance from his parents, and he wanted his children to be able to pursue something that he did. And then the more I got thinking about it, um, it just came to something that I thought, you know what, as a chief officer, I don't know a lot of chief officers that have their masters. I think I was intimidated about becoming a chief officer. I don't know what I don't know, and that scared me a little bit.
Sure.
And there might be a day that I'm the chief someplace, and if that day happens, um, I'd like to at least say that I've exhausted as much of the educational, component that I could. So anyway, so I enrolled for my master's degree. That was also online. I finished that up, and that was in public administration as well. And yeah, and again, I loved it. It was a whole different experience. I'm done. I'm not going for a PhD. But I think the education piece is important. I'm in the EFO program right now and just had my first residency. It's different than a managing fire officer program. But it's again, it's that next level of challenge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so so education in the fire service depends on what you want, depends on how you want it. If your job or your goal in the fire service is I want to ride backwards, that's my passion. I don't want to move up. I want to stay in this role,
Yep. Yep.
stay in the role. Education, you can still get the education and still maximize it, still be of
Sure.
value. If it's not for you, then it's not for you. And some people can't afford it. Some people can't manage the time. Imagine having, several children. Imagine having a full-time work schedule. Imagine having sports, all this other stuff. And then now I'm going to work on a bachelor's and
Oh,
master's.
I know.
Not everyone can manage that. And so really, my take on it is if you have the means to do it and you can commit to it, by all means do it. It's a great challenge. But if you don't have those things, take other classes, right? Always perfect
Right.
your trade. But there's a lot of ways to do it. Formal education was just the path that I took while I was on the line. I wanted there to be a mix. You remember the old interview questions? What's more important, education or experience? Remember
Mm-hmm.
those
Mm-hmm.
questions,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Yep.
And I've always answered those questions with experience. But education plays a different role in the fire service than the experience does because they change, right? Those roles change based on where you're at and what the need is. I wanted to be able to provide both. So, anyways, that's what I did. That was my path. And there's other things that I took along the way there, but those were the most fun. Yeah, there's been other stuff, but
So, the good news is that obviously we're recording this because we're going to eventually share it. So, all the things that all the things that we didn't talk about, we'll talk about next time because there'll be a next time because why not, right? I mean, I'll eventually get to all of the alphabet and I'll have to come back to the top and we'll start back at AA again. And so there will
I'm
be a
gonna
next
change
time.
it to Aalto.
You could just keep going, right? Balto, Calto, Dalto, and then I could every letter we could just start with you.
Yeah, I'll
Um,
see you next week.
yeah, I know, right? You'll be the only guest. I'll have 50 episodes. You'll be the only person we talk to. Which you know what? I don't. That probably wouldn't be horrible. I mean, it might be horrible for the listener, but it wouldn't be horrible for probably you and I. Let's. I want to talk about books, and then we can say goodbye. So, I'm an avid reader. I don't read not nearly enough. I fall short typically of my reading goal every year, which is fine because it's pretty high for me. And I always set the same one, and I'm glad I always fall short because then I know I got to try harder next time. But I'm still reading a lot of books. So, but I always like to ask people, what they're reading now, right, or what their favorite book is, whatever, and then what is something they recommend? And a lot of times people say, well, it's the same thing, but it's not. If you ask me a book I recommend, it just depends on who you are, because I might recommend a different book to you. And it might, why you're asking. And if but my favorite book, or the book that I read a lot, is maybe a different book than what I'd recommend, because, well, I read it because it's for me. It's not, I mean, you wouldn't like it. It's unique. So what are you reading now? What's the last thing you read? Like what is in the briefcase or on the bookshelf that, doesn't have any dust on it because you just got it and you just read it and you just finished it? What's that?
You bet. Well, and for full disclosure, this was one of the things that we did talk about in
Yeah.
advance, was, that we might talk about books. And so just to make it easy, so when I was at school at University of Oregon, I was in the Sigma Nu fraternity. Sigma Nu fraternity's got a huge tradition. It goes back largely formed Civil War time. And one of my best friends growing up, his son Max just started Oklahoma State, and he's now a Sigma Nu. And so it rekindled my interest. So this is the story of Sigma Nu. And the funny thing is that it was this was published in 1927, and so it has obviously an older view of it, but it has all the original stories and the background and history, and it's really a backdrop to Civil War, right? And how these different people, and they formed this fraternity. So anyway, that story of Sigma Nu is probably one of the, I mean, that's what I'm just getting into right now.
Sure.
Most recent read, because I was forced to, was Leadership on the Line with Heifetz and Linsky. That was for EFO. I wouldn't have picked it up off the shelf. It was the one I was told to read, so I read it.
Yeah, that happens, right? I mean, sometimes it's somebody else that's, a colleague recommends it, and that colleague maybe outranks you, and you go, oh yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'll read it.
You read it, and
This is the one I just finished. It's Biggest Brother, story of Major Dick Winters, by Larry Alexander. I just love stories about how Major Winters processed problems, how he thought through things. I think there's a lot of wisdom in his simplicity, and I always look for, and typically fail, but I always look for the most simple way of delivering a message. And I think that our most effective communicators do it in as few words as possible. And I think that he was one of those people. One of my favorite authors is Adam Makos. This is a book called Spearhead, about this tank crew in World War II. And I think the reason why he's one of my favorite authors, you ever read a book and you can watch it in your head like a movie?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I read his content. I read it and I'm just watching it play out in my head, which is a pretty remarkable effect for an author. It's, it's almost,
when they talk about, and sorry, when they talk about, was a book or movie better, right? Whatever it is, was a book or movie better? And if you've never seen the movie, the book will always be better, because you're painting the picture in your mind's eye. Okay, Stephen King, I've never read The Shining. I've seen 2 different versions of the movie, but I've never read the book. But I know today, if I read the book, my mind's eye is tainted, right? Because I've seen the movies. So I will revert back to that, where if you hadn't seen the movie, right? If you've never seen the movie, then you're playing it in your mind's eye, that place you're comfortable. So now you feel at home in whatever the setting is. And I didn't realize that until I was much older. I was clearly probably in my mid to late 30s and reading, kind of going, oh wait, now, like you said, I'm painting this picture. I'm in this story. I'm immersed in this. I'm a fly on the wall, hearing this captain talk to this, group of firefighters, or hearing this chief tell this story, or whatever it is. So I think that's important, that when people read, they take the time to, speed reading's popular. People always say, oh, speed read. Well, if you speed read, you miss some of that stuff. And, if you're speed reading just to say, well, I read 40 books this year. Okay. Can you tell me about any of them? I would rather someone read the same 10 books every year and have complete command and control over that information than read 40 books a year and have no idea what they're talking about,
Yeah. Well, it's getting outside of the fire service. There's a lot of tremendous fire books and fire authors out there. There's a lot of other subjects, and a lot of the stuff I've liked is, it gears towards, a lot of it's World War II stuff, a lot of it's military stuff. I think there's some really cool stories there. But I also, I'm reading a book about the fraternity, or I might read a book about a story. I love biographies, and so I just find things like that interesting. I guess this this would be probably one of the last ones. A lot of folks in the fire service know this one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Michael Evershoff, It's Your Ship. And there's a lot of books out there about leadership. What I like about that one though is that it doesn't come across like a leadership book. Like, it doesn't say in this lesson you learned this about leadership. It talks about doing things in a system or an organization that are typically forbidden, or you can't do them, or they're not wired to be done that way. And that's the fire service, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the fire service. We are wired in a way that there is right and there's wrong, and there's things that are, could be seen as taboo. But Abershop had tremendous success. He had the U.S. Benfold, and the reason why they had success is he went against the tide, if you know what I mean. He did things that weren't typically seen, as correct. And I look at the fire academy. The fire academy has a bar on campus called the command post, right? And that's kind of become this taboo thing in the fire service. But the reality is, though, it's like, where do we go to meet? Where do we go to network? And it's not just because they have Yinglings there. It's because people are there.
Right.
And so, anyways, that's one of the reasons why I really enjoyed that book. I like his writing, and just like Adam Makos, you can see yourself solving problems through his lens when you just kind of remember that the fire service is designed to change. It doesn't feel like it, and it but it is designed to change. Otherwise, we'd still have horses pulling our wagons. And so anyways, those are the books that I've I hope that whoever does tune into to these sort of things, a lot of times the people that are looking for the additional information, the conversations, they're doing them because they're looking for those sound bites, right? They're looking for something that plugs in their head and then they can apply it. And the tragedy is, so many times we don't apply these things. So for people listening in, it's taking the mind off of the critique, and it's taking the mind off of the learning, and being able to find there's value in reproducing it, sharing it with others. There's a saying out there that's, it's amazing what we could accomplish if no one took the credit. And I just hope that for the value in the future of the podcast, and for any sort of information that people are looking for, is that they keep looking, right? Keep looking for other things. Find something you like, dig into it, stick your teeth into it, and keep looking. And I'm grateful that you are opening up this as an avenue, and that I have a chance to talk with you, because it does kind of feel like we're just sitting back and we're talking at Fire Academy, or we're talking someplace else. So I'm grateful for that as well. But this is a fun time, and so thank you.
Well, thank you. Our guest has been Matt Aalto. My name's Dean Babineau. Our engineer and producer is Matt Rice. And join us next time when we'll be talking fire.